Good morning, Barbara.
Good morning.
This is Barbara M. Britton. I discovered I have to use the M because there's another Barbara Britton. I guess she was an actress. I'm not sure.
Yes, in the 40s, there was an actress called Barbara Britton. And when
Uh-huh.
I used to go through security at airports, a lot of the older men would say, "Oh, Mrs. North." And I was like, what are they talking about? And then I discovered that there was the actress. So when I got my domain names, I put my middle initial in there to kind of separate us out. And I think because time has gone on, I come up before her in a lot of Google searches now, which
Okay,
is good.
well, I wonder when that will happen for me with Katy Perry.
Well, I tried to go on Amazon and different places and put in Kathy, and it kept taking me to Katy Perry. And I'm
Uh-huh.
like, I'm typing this correctly. Why are you
I
taking me?
know. I can even put my middle initial in there. I can say Kathy J. Perry, and it'll say, "Did you mean Katy Perry?" No.
Yeah.
So,
So
yes. Well, I don't know. She's a lot younger than me, so that probably won't happen. Anyway, Barbara is a an author, and she's written several books. Since what year you've been writing?
my first book came out in 2016, but
Uh,
I started my very first story in 2007.
uh-huh,
So it took me about 8 years from completing my first story and writing several books before I got a book contract.
uh-huh. Very good. And so you've written how many since 16?
Well, I have a few under the bed, but I have 9 books published,
That's
and my
great. That's a
10th will be out
lot.
in uh, September, end of September.
What's the end of September?
I have Escape to Whispering Creek. So
Okay.
if anyone read Christmas at Whispering Creek,
Uh-huh.
I have a romance between Emma and Wade coming out at the end of September. And the theme was, where is God when your life is falling apart? So that was the theme to that romance.
Oh, okay. Good. So Barbara's a Christian author, and she writes biblical historical fiction, which she's going to talk about her book Lioness today, and maybe a little bit about the sequels. She has a couple of sequels too, and then she has the Christian romance too, right? So
Right. And I do have a World War I historical, um,
okay,
but I'm predominantly known for biblical fiction. Yeah.
okay,
Which I
okay,
love to write.
yeah. So my first question for you is, what led you to write Lioness and then sequels?
I write about little known Bible characters, and I wasn't even thinking about writing on the daughters of Zelophehad because I did not know that story. And somebody at a Bible study brought up the daughters of Zelophehad, and I had just done a read through the Bible, which is kind of sad, but I didn't remember them. And I went home and I researched them and I said, how come I don't know this story? It's like a David and Goliath story for girls. And
Mhm.
there's so much scripture on them. And I said, nobody talks about them. In fact, today, when I say the daughters of Zelophehad, people give me blank looks. So I went home, I researched them, and I said, this would make a great story.
Mhm.
So I sat down and I wrote Lioness Mala's Journey. And it was all about the 5 orphan sisters and their big ask to inherit their father's land. And also, they have to figure out who these girls are going to marry because when God gave the land to the different tribes of Israel, that land was supposed to stay with that certain tribe. And these girls were descendants of Joseph and the tribe of Manasseh. But if they had married outside that tribe, there was going to be a land shift. And the men were a little upset about that from the tribe of Manasseh. So God works it all out on who they can marry. And that's all I was going to cover in Lioness. And I
Mhm.
finished the book and I said to myself, these girls don't have their land. I mean, they weren't going to get their land until Canaan was conquered, which took about 7 years.
Mhm.
So I wasn't planning a series, but I said, I really should write the storyline through the book of Joshua until these girls get their land. And so that's why I wrote Heavenly Lights and Claiming Canaan. And I will tell writers or authors, plan out your series before you start writing book one, because I was running out of men that were really great heroes. And so in Claiming Canaan, I had to shift a guy I kind of made less favorable
Hmm.
into a hero for the story. And that made a lot more work for me. So I always say plan out your series before you start. So, but I'm totally thrilled that I did the other two books, because I
Great.
just loved these girls and their story, and really developing their personalities through two more books. They're they're
So
like real people to me.
we're talking way back there. And so there's not a lot of information in the Bible about them, right?
There's a good chunk of scripture about them. So they're mentioned a couple places where it's just a verse about Zelophehad had no daughters, and it lists their names. But in Numbers 27, verses 1 through 11, you'll find their big ask for land. And then in chapter 36 of Numbers, verses 1 through 12, it's them going back into the assembly and working out with Moses and God who they're going to marry. And then later on, I give these girls credit. In the book of Joshua, they're mentioned again when the land is being distributed. They go back to Joshua and they say, now remember, Moses gave us our land. So actually, there's a lot of scripture on these girls.
Okay.
And that's why I couldn't understand why I never heard about them.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of
I hadn't
scripture
either. Uh,
on them
so I
to
wondered how
really dig out.
you fleshed out such a story with just really bare bones
Mhm.
information. So some of it, so it's fiction
Right,
based on reality,
right.
but you kind of had to go back and research like the way people lived, their roles, women and men's roles, what they dressed, how they dressed, what they ate, and all the trials that they were going through during that time.
Right.
Right.
And Lioness was my fourth biblical fiction book. So I had a good idea on the customs of the day and what people ate and how they acted, just from, reading the Bible, researching the Bible, having Bible dictionaries, concordances.
Mhm.
My husband is an ordained minister, so he reads Greek and Hebrew, so he can go back to the original language for me. So I had an idea by this time, when it was my fourth biblical fiction novel, the culture of the day.
Mhm.
And it was really researching the girls. And there's a lot of storyline on them. And even going into the book of Joshua, there's a lot of storyline.
Mhm.
But what was interesting is the villain in that book, I'll call him a villain, was Balaam, son of Beor. And in the book of Numbers, you remember him with the talking donkey, and it tells you that he died, but you don't get a lot of fleshing out of his character, or how bad he really was. And
Mhm.
for that, you have to cross reference in the Bible.
Mhm.
And he is maligned from Deuteronomy all the way to the book of Revelation.
Oh.
And so that was really interesting to me, that this character, that we don't get a lot of detail about his sorcery and how evil he was, uh, until you read other portions of scripture. And so a lot of times you have to kind of cross reference
Mhm.
scripture to get a full view of the character you're writing. And
Mhm.
he was one that I needed the other scriptures to
Mhm.
really write him as wicked as he was back
Mhm.
then in the book of Numbers.
Mhm. So research was a big deal for you. I mean, I was took some time. And I could tell by just looking, I haven't read the book yet, but I wish I probably should by now. But, um, I read at least the excerpt that you can see, the preview, and I can tell that the reader's gonna feel like they're there,
Well,
like,
I hope so. I
yeah.
hope so. I take a lot of takes a lot of work, but I hope they really feel like they're immersed in
Mhm.
that time period, and really immersed in the relationships between the girls. Because they're historical figures, I couldn't change their names.
No.
So I was stuck with Mala, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah. So they all end in and you have Mala and Milcah, which are very similar sounding.
Mhm.
And so I had to really work at defining who each of these girls were, so that the reader didn't get confused.
Mhm.
And I started out the book with Mala, the oldest sister, and Tirza, the youngest, going outside the camp because I had different letter sounds to start the names, and I had a wide age range because I said, I can't have Mala and Milka going outside the camp. People will just throw the book against the wall. It would be too confusing. So that's what people would said when they read it early on is you have to be careful to not confuse the reader about who these girls are.
Mhm. Okay. Where can we find your books? Where can we get them?
My books are on Amazon, barnesandnoble.com. If you Google them, thrift books, CBD, there's a lot of places that you can purchase them.
Mhm.
Barnes and Noble, brick and mortar can order them. Some of the local ones have them here.
Mhm.
But yeah, they're anywhere. If you Google my name, it'll come up.
And then, do you have a blog too? I think
I
you
have a website and I do post blog posts on other people's blogs. And so on my website, you can go to the blog page and it will tell you what I'm talking about as far as Bible times, writing biblical fiction, writing
Mhm.
Christian romance,
Mhm.
how I made that journey from one genre to another.
Mhm.
There's a lot on there because there's so much when I go to write biblical fiction that I didn't know about the Bible and these little phrases that have so much impact and meaning. And so I love just putting them into my stories and really,
What's one that you can give us an example of?
well, like with Lioness,
Mhm.
the girls are in the tribe of Manasseh. And that is one of the tribes that splits. And part of the tribe of Manasseh stayed east of the Jordan, and part of the tribe of Manasseh went west of the Jordan. And I
Mhm.
had to research and find out, like, well, did the girls cross over the Jordan? Because that's a big piece of the story. If they don't
I
cross
wonder
the
how
Jordan,
big the Jordan was. I mean, compared to our rivers that we know that we're familiar with, I wonder what river it would be comparable to.
well, it changes because my son was in Israel a few years back, and the Jordan is like a trickle.
Oh,
But back then, at certain places today, it's fairly large.
uh-huh,
So I was in Israel last March, and I was around the Sea of Galilee, and the Jordan flows into the Sea of Galilee, or the Sea of Galilee flows into Jordan, one way or the other.
uh-huh.
But the Jordan was fairly large. I mean, it's something that I wouldn't want to cross. It's bigger than the Rio Grande at times. So it was a fairly large river back then.
Mhm.
But I had to research and find out the clan the girls belonged to, and it lists in scripture what clans crossed over that river. And
Mhm.
so I had to make sure that I had that right. Otherwise, someone would have emailed me or written me and said, the girls of Zelophehad crossed over the river. They didn't stay on the side you have them in.
Oh,
So I had to really be clear on that piece of information in scripture.
mhm.
I didn't want to get it wrong.
Wonder how they crossed. I wonder if they just took a boat or if they took a raft.
A raft or a boat, or depending on you know how fast it was flowing. But originally, when they crossed over the Jordan, it was God parted it, just like the Red Sea. So they had dry ground to go over the Jordan.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of people. It's almost like a mini
Is that a
parting of the Red
fact?
Sea, right there.
Is that a fact?
Yeah, that's a
Really?
fact.
Okay.
That God parted it, and it was dry, and they crossed over.
Okay.
You wonder what the people in Jericho, that might have been why they were really afraid when the Israelites crossed over, because they just saw a miracle of God.
Yeah, these people must be special.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So what are you working on now?
So
Oh
I
yeah,
just
you're working
finished,
on your coming up book, right?
right. So I have just done the first line of edits for my Escape to Whispering Creek book. But
Uh-huh.
right now I'm working on, it's a biblical project. It's more biblical fiction written in a short story format with reflections and Bible study.
Oh.
So it's something a little new for me, but I'm loving it
Mhm.
because I traveled around the Sea of Galilee last March, and it just came alive to me to be there. And so a lot of the teaching that I got when I was there, I'm putting into this novel, and the experience of just being where Jesus walked and seeing these towns that you hear about, like Capernaum and Magdala, So it was just a dream come true to go over there and actually see uh, where Jesus
I think I would be
walked.
afraid to go over there right now.
Yeah, I guess we were there at a good time. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of the tours, there were so many tours there in March, but I'm sure
Mm,
a lot of the tours have stopped now, unfortunately, with the war.
yeah, yeah. I would love to go visit there someday if I could. Yeah.
Yeah, I found it so peaceful there,
Hmm.
and which is a shame now that it's not, but it was the most peaceful place to be.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay. Well, I don't think I have anything else right now.
Yeah, well, yeah, I enjoy writing biblical fiction, just bringing the little Bible characters to life, and
Mhm.
it surprises me how much I didn't know. A lot of them are in the Old Testament,
Yeah.
and
Do you think
so
a lot of the people in my group are either parents or teachers or homeschoolers or regular schools, or just grandparents or are the writers? Do you think high schoolers, would your books be okay for high schoolers?
oh, definitely, because if they go back and read the Bible, I follow numbers, mid numbers through the book of Joshua, pretty much
I mean,
like
it's not
God
too
wrote it.
difficult, not too difficult. It's like even middle school to high school, not middle school, but like junior high and high school.
I think so because my background is teaching chapel to kindergarten through fifth grade.
Oh,
So I I feel like I write biblical fiction for teenagers,
okay.
and I try not to make it too difficult. So I'm very character driven.
Hmm.
And so therefore I get into the character, and why there's a lot going on around them, you're really following a character on how they would experience these actions that happen in the Bible. So
Hmm.
there's not a lot of big words or intricacies in governments that would really tie you down
Hmm.
and might maybe bore you. So I try and keep it very character focused, very action
Yeah.
packed, and with like the Daughters of Zelophehad, with Defending David, with Jerusalem Rising, they are very much following the Bible narrative rather closely. I get a lot of plot line just strictly from the Bible, which is fabulous because
Hmm.
it makes my job easier. I just have to work on the characters,
Hmm.
but which can be a challenge.
Hmm.
But yes, so I love writing about Bible stories where there's a lot of narrative because it just makes my job so much easier, and I can focus on bringing the characters more to light.
Hmm. Well, I'm gonna get it.
Oh, well, thank you.
Then I'll post a review somewhere.
So, well, thank you for having me today. This has
Yes,
been
thank you very
wonderful.
much for giving us this time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kathy.
Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
Mhm.